Welcome to Art Talk for Teens. My name is Kathi, and here are two views of the James A. Michener Art Museum in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. This is where I lead tours, and so let's just take a quick minute to look at the museum. The picture on the left is the old building that used to be here, the Bucks County Prison, which was actually on this site from the 1880s to the 1980s. And you can see it's a very old-fashioned building, and parts of that old prison are still here, but mostly the site is a brand new modern art museum, which was built in the 1980s. And here it is, the James A. Michener Art Museum. It's named after James A. Michener, who was one of the best-selling writers of the 20th century, maybe the best-selling writer of the 20th century. And he wrote many, many books. He used to like to travel around the world and write about the places he went and the people he met and the cultures that he investigated. And he was a very interesting man, and he loved art and was very successful. And he was from Doylestown. He was born and raised in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So he had a lot to do with the formation of the museum when it first got started. And then finally, you should know that we're a regional art museum. So that means that we have a large collection of works by artists who live in the Delaware Valley of Pennsylvania and right here in Bucks County, where we are. You might live in this area, or you might live far away from us. So the artist we're going to be discussing this time is Syd Carpenter. And here's an example of the exhibition of her work at the Art Museum and the dates it was on display. This will give you a kind of an idea of the sort of work that she does. Now, obviously today I'm going to be doing all the talking because this is pre-recorded. But I'm going to be asking you questions anyway, things to think about. And of course, I'm hoping that you'll get involved in your own way. You can get involved by looking at the art, really taking time to examine it, by thinking about the different questions I pose and the different questions that you think of, and even talking. If you've got somebody there to talk with, feel free to pause the video and discuss what you're looking at any point, and try to make the most out of it. You might want to have a pencil and paper handy so that you could jot down notes or ideas or thoughts or sketches. You might want to be sketching your own artistic ideas as we go through looking at the work of Syd Carpenter. So this is one of the two works that we'll be focusing on today. And the first thing I want you to do is what we always do when we look at a work of art, which is look at it. Just take a really good amount of time to sort of examine the work and do what we would call a visual inventory. Just look and see what you see. So the first thing you might say to me is, well, this is a sculpture, and you would be right. This is a sculpture. It's three-dimensional, but it's not completely three-dimensional. It's not flat like a painting on the wall, but it is hanging on the wall. So the back of it would be flat, and then from that back, it comes forward. So we would call that a relief sculpture, and this is a high relief sculpture. So for comparison, here's a low relief sculpture. This is not a piece in our museum. It's a very, very old piece from the 6th century in another museum, but it is an example of low relief. So you see that the sculpture itself only comes out a little bit from the background on this piece, but look at how far it comes out on Syd Carpenter's piece. That piece is so rounded that, well, you can't touch any art in the museum, but if you could almost put your hand around this shape or this shape and grip it, because it is so such high relief, so rounded, which makes it pretty interesting. Another thing you might say to me if you were examining this is that it's brown. The color is brown, and it's all brown. So you could just say, okay, we've done color, but actually it's more complicated than that, because look at all the browns on here. Some is a deep, rich, very smooth brown, but some of it is kind of streaky and reddish and almost kind of rusty looking. Some parts are are smooth and other parts have a very rough texture. So the variety of what you're looking at within that ground is pretty broad. And then we have this linear effect. So we see lines, but there are different kinds of lines. These lines down here are more organic, sort of curving. We call it organic because it's kind of like things in the natural world, and so it's kind of curving and soft. But up here, these look more like man-made lines. So you can almost imagine Syd Carpenter cutting out that clay with a knife, and so that's a much more organic kind of, more man-made kind of line. Before we go any further, I want to give you a little background on Syd Carpenter, which I think is going to help you to understand this sculpture a lot better. First of all, it's important to know that Syd Carpenter is a gardener. Maybe you have a garden in your home, maybe you don't, maybe you're interested in gardening, maybe you're not. But even if you're not interested in gardening, I think you would like this garden. I mean, it's winter where I am right now, and I would love to be out in a space like that. It's a city garden. It's in Philadelphia, but it's, even though it's in the middle of a city, oh, it's just so lush and so gorgeous. And I imagine you would enjoy sitting there with your friends. Syd Carpenter feels the same way. She likes to be there with her family and her community. But also, remember, she's an artist. And so she approaches this as her art, part of her artwork. And so she considers color, she considers the forms, she considers the composition, how she lays everything in the same way that she does her sculptural artwork. So you could say this is her garden art studio. And then here is Syd Carpenter herself in her sculptural art studio. I don't know if you've ever been in an artist's art studio, but it's really an interesting place to be because you see all their tools, their materials, their works in progress. It's really kind of interesting. And she's a teacher at Swarthmore College, so she might teach in a space very much like this. Now back to the garden thing, because that's the basic influence of all the artwork she does. We also know that her mother and her grandmother, those important people in her family, were also gardeners. And so when she's in the garden, she thinks about them. And not only that, but gardening and farming is a really important part of African American culture. African Americans were the backbone of the farming culture in early America, especially in the South. They did the tilling of the field, they did the harvesting of the crops, and they also had their own gardens often behind their homes to fill out their diets, their vegetable gardens. So gardening was just such an important part for them. And interestingly, I didn't know this some time ago, that there are so many African American farmers in America today, thousands. And so Syd Carpenter became so interested in that she decided she was going to travel in the South, mostly in Georgia and South Carolina, and meet some of these farmers. So she went to their farms, she met them, she got to know them, she studied the visual aspects of the garden, and then when she got back, she began to create these sculptures. And she made over 30 of them. And if you take a look over here in the object label, you'll see the name Syd Carpenter, the artist, and then below that, another name, Ella Mae Edwards. And Ella Mae Edwards it was her garden that this sculpture is based on. It's kind of a portrait of her and her land and her life, but it is not a portrait of her face. You don't see Ella Mae Edwards, but you do see her life. So now that we know that this speaks to a farm, let's go back and see if we can re-examine some things we saw before. This here, which looks like a little house, it could also be a tool shed. It may be a house, but it also might be a tool shed. A farmer would have a place like that always to store tools and equipment that they use on the farm. So these tend to appear in most of the sculptures in this series. Now we look again at those curvilinear lines, those organic lines. What could those be? They could be furrows in the soil, like when it's been plowed and it's used for planting. You may also think of water. Water is essential on a farm. So maybe Ella Mae Edwards had a brook or some sort of water source that you could see. Now these man-made areas here that look like they look like they're man-made. What could those be? There's lots of possibilities, but one that comes to mind for me is a fence. Why is a fence important on a farm? Well, you know, most farmers have fences to keep the animals out from eating their crops, maybe to keep people out who would come and steal their apples or their chickens or something. But also in the South, some African American farmers are in a hostile environment. They're not welcoming their community, and so the fence could represent protection, safety, the feeling of being on your own property in your own place and being safe there. So a fence can be an important symbol. All of the things here are symbols of Ella Mae Edwards' life and her work. Let's look again at that brown color. We can figure out a lot about a piece by looking again at our object label. We see that it's made out of ceramic, so that would be the clay. We see acrylic. Syd Carpenter uses paint sometimes to paint her sculptures, and sometimes she uses glazes and other things. But acrylic would indicate maybe this is painted with acrylic paint. And then here we have graphite and wood. Well, the wood, I'm not exactly sure what parts would be wood. There could be carved parts on here, or it may just be that the backing of it's wood. But the graphite, that's what you have in your pencil. We call it lead, but it's really graphite. And you can buy that in a powdered form. And it's quite possible that she rubbed that on the surface to get this wonderful sheen, these different effects of brown that are so varied all over the piece. And then we have to ask ourselves, what is the symbolic purpose of the color brown? What does that mean? What is she saying with brown? Certainly that could reference the soil, the land that these people are all farming. But it could also represent their skin, that these are African Americans, and that dark, rich brown could be a reference or celebration of their skin. Now, how would you consider the surface texture here? We've certainly talked about how some of it's very smooth, but other parts are stippled, maybe with little dots and rough places here. Up here, there's so much to look at in terms of the surface. And then there's this shape, which I've been avoiding, and I'm sure it's the first thing you noticed and the first thing you wanted to talk about. It's front and center. It's the most important thing in this sculpture, and I saved it till the end. What is this shape? Do you recognize it? You might say that it is an old-fashioned clothespin, which is what it is. You'd be right. But it also looks like something else. Looks like a person. Here would be the head. Here would be the torso. Here would be the legs. And it has this sort of curvy shape, which might reference a woman. And in fact, that's exactly what Syd Carpenter intends here. So let's take a look at that clothespin. This is what an old-fashioned clothespin looked like. This is the kind you might be more familiar with, a mechanical, modern kind of clothespin. You may not be familiar with clothespins at all. If you have a dryer in your home and you always dry all your clothes, you don't hang things out on the line. But in the old days, when I was a girl, when Syd Carpenter was a girl, everybody hung clothes out on the line. And so when they did that, they would have a bag like this, and this is a clothespin bag, and it would be full of clothespins. And the mother usually would be out there taking the very wet and heavy clothes out of that basket and putting them up on the line, and then picking out the clothespins to hold the clothing on the line so it wouldn't blow off. It was heavy, hard work, and the line was very high, so a child couldn't do it, but a child could help. So the kids would always be there. Maybe they're just running around and playing, but maybe some of the children are pulling out the clothes, the wet clothes, and handing them to their mother so she can put it up on the line and secure it with a clothespin. This is an important memory for Syd Carpenter. She remembers being out in the yard with her mother and with her grandmother as they were putting up the clothes. And so that shape has begun to symbolize for her mother, her grandmother, but also all mothers. That clothespin shape speaks to sort of a symbol of mothers and all of our mothers, and how they care for us and how they nurture the family. And so that's why that's so important there. It's that symbol of the mother. Now, all of these things here that we're looking at, the clothespins and and the clothes bag and the line that the clothes are hanging on and the clothes themselves. Those are all things that we call material culture. Material culture is your stuff. It's all the things that people make, tools, weapons, machines, ornaments, toys, clothing. All our stuff is called material culture. And when people die or move on, they leave their material culture behind. People often study it and try to figure out more about people based on their material culture. When we look at things that may bring back our own memories of our lives are based on material culture. So if you think about the material culture in your own home, maybe your father has a favorite chair or a favorite coffee cup, and you look at that coffee cup, you always think of your father. Or maybe your mother has a favorite handbag, or maybe she drives around all day in the car doing errands for the family and taking you places. And so when you look at those car keys, you think of your mother. That would be material culture. And it's important because it speaks to our lives. Okay, so this is the last piece we're going to look at. It's very different from the other piece, but it's also by Syd Carpenter. The first thing you probably notice is that it's a complete sculpture in the round. It's not a relief sculpture. You could walk completely around this sculpture and really examine all the parts of it, even though we can only see the front of it. And what I want you to do now is I want you to do your own visual inventory. Take a really good look at this picture. Study all the shapes. I want you to pause this video while you do it so you have time to really see what you're looking at. Try to pick every single thing out that you can see or make sense of. And when you're all done, then we'll talk again. So go ahead and pause the video. Now I'm going to assume that you've done that. You've looked it over. You've got an idea of what you're looking at. And now we're going to go through it together. So the first thing you notice, I'm sure, is this bench at the bottom. It looks like wood, but it's actually made out of steel. And then you notice this coming up here, and there's some objects on there. Let's look at that a little more closely. So this is clearly an egg. It has that smooth, iconic egg shape. This is probably a seed because it's more rounded, a little bit irregular and more textured. Then when we get up here, what do we see? Well, probably more eggs over here. This looks like another seed. It looks like an almond to me. This is a cart like you might use on a farm. This is a basket, a harvest basket, a wheel. These often appear in her sculptures of farms because wheels are so important in doing the work of the farm. This is another one of those little houses or tool sheds. Here's a thistle, something growing. Of course, it's a farm. And then this rough texture is very common in the sculptures. I don't know what it means. Something to think about. Maybe the soil, maybe seeds. Hard to say. And also, don't forget to look at your object label. So here we see that this one is called Sarah Reynolds. So Sarah Reynolds was a farmer. She had a farm in the South. She was a very important part of her community. She had this organic farm, and she also had a restaurant. And also, she invited people to come and learn to farm on her farm, especially children. She would teach them how to do their own organic farming so that hopefully they could grow their own food someday. And so that makes the idea of seeds have more than one meaning, because of course you plant a seed, it's going to grow into a plant. But also you can plant seeds in other people. You can plant a seed in your community by educating somebody or teaching somebody something. If they go on and do that thing, then that seed bears fruit. So that seed has many different meanings, not just one. If Syd Carpenter were to make a sculpture about you, if she were going to look at your material culture and make a portrait, what would she pick to put into that portrait? Wouldn't have your face, but it could have your things, whatever things you think are most important in your material culture. Maybe it's your soccer ball. Maybe it's a pair of ballet slippers. Maybe it's your phone. What are the important things that mark your life now or maybe in the past as well? What would it be for you, that object that tells so much about who you are and what your life experience is? So give that some thought. And if you're art inclined, you might want to make a picture or a sculpture or collage that features your material culture. It could be like a portrait of you, but not showing your face, but more showing your life through symbols. I can even imagine that as a photograph where you would organize everything as a kind of composition and take a photograph of it. And that would be a work of art. That would be your own art. So I hope you'll consider doing that. I hope you had a good time looking at this art with me today. I enjoyed it. And if you'd like more information about Syd Carpenter or about other artists at the Michener Museum, or even about more art in Bucks County, you can go to the Michener's Bucks County Artist Database, and they have this link, and you can go there and learn more. Also, if you'd like to learn more about how this artist works or how other artists work, their tools, their materials, painting techniques, anything you'd like to learn about art, you can find out a lot here at Learn with the Michener. You could even find activities that you could do on your own at home or with friends. So I hope you'll check that out, and I even hope someday that you get to come and visit our museum. Goodbye for today.